If an avoidant is on your mind every single day, there is a reason. And no, it is not because you are weak, desperate, or unable to let go. When someone lingers in your thoughts like that, when their name almost rises to your lips at random moments, when memories hit you in the quiet hours of the night, it usually means the connection wasn't one-sided. It means something unresolved is still moving beneath the surface. You feel it. And the truth is, if they're on your mind every day, something is happening on their side too. Avoidants are not emotionless. They are emotional in a way that is buried, delayed, and often misunderstood. They don't always process feelings when they happen, they process them when it's quiet. When distractions fade, when ego softens, when the world stops watching. So if they are on your mind daily, it's very possible that you are crossing their mind too, especially in the moments they cannot escape themselves. The first thing that is actually happening to them is this: they are fighting feelings they do not know how to handle. Avoidants experience connection differently. When things get intense, their instinct is not to lean in, it is to create space. Not because they do not care, but because caring feels overwhelming. If you shared something real with them, something emotionally intimate, that connection did not just disappear because they pulled away. What likely happened is that the depth scared them. So now, if you are thinking about them every day, chances are they are having quiet, internal battles too. They think about you in small flashes, in between tasks, while driving, before sleep. They replay certain moments, the way you looked at them, the way you understood them without forcing them to explain. And then they push the thought away. They distract themselves. They tell themselves they are fine. They convince themselves distance was necessary. But suppression is not deletion. Feelings pushed down do not vanish. They wait. And every time your absence becomes noticeable, those feelings resurface. They may not text, they may not call, but internally, they are wrestling with something they never fully processed. And that internal fight can be exhausting. The second thing happening to them is that your silence is echoing louder than you think. When you stop reaching out, when you stop checking in, when you stop chasing, something shifts in their nervous system. Avoidants often feel safe when they know someone is there, even if they act independent. When that consistency disappears, they feel it immediately. At first, they may feel relief, space, control, but then something else creeps in: curiosity, then uncertainty, then a quiet discomfort they cannot explain. They check their phone more than usual, even if they tell themselves they do not care. They wonder if you are moving on. They notice the lack of your energy in their daily rhythm. If you used to send messages, share thoughts, laugh at small things, that absence becomes noticeable. They may not admit it out loud. They may even appear unaffected. But internally, your silence forces them to sit with emotions they avoided before. And that silence can feel heavier than any argument ever did, because silence leaves room for imagination, and imagination can be brutal. They start asking themselves questions they never wanted to face. What if you are done? What if you are detaching? What if they push too far this time? Your silence becomes a mirror, and avoidants are not always comfortable with what they see in that reflection. The third thing happening to them is that they are slowly realizing you are rare. When someone truly sees an avoidant without trying to change them, it leaves an imprint. You may have been patient with their space, understanding of their need for independence, gentle with their emotional walls. That kind of acceptance is not common. So when distance grows and new interactions begin to feel shallow or forced, comparison happens naturally. They might meet new people, they might talk, laugh, distract themselves, but depth is hard to replicate. Emotional safety is even harder. And without even meaning to, they start noticing the difference. Conversations lack that quiet understanding you shared. Others may not read their silences the way you did. They might begin to miss the way you handled their moods without making it a conflict. Regret does not always arrive dramatically. Sometimes it comes softly. A small realization in the middle of an ordinary day. A memory that feels warmer than expected. A sudden awareness that what they had with you was not easily replaceable. And the more time passes, the more that realization settles in. They may not run back immediately. Pride and fear still exist, but the awareness grows. And once someone recognizes rarity, it is very difficult to unsee it. The fourth thing happening to them is that they are pretending to be fine while breaking in ways they would never show. Avoidants have mastered emotional composure. They can look calm even when something is stirring beneath the surface. They can laugh with friends, focus on work, keep routines steady. On the outside, it may seem like nothing touched them, but that does not mean they are unaffected. It means they cope differently. Instead of expressing pain openly, they internalize it. Instead of reaching out, they retreat. Instead of admitting they miss you, they tell themselves missing someone makes them vulnerable, so they suppress. But suppression creates pressure, and pressure eventually finds cracks. It might show up as irritability, restlessness, difficulty sleeping, random waves of nostalgia they did not expect. They might scroll through old messages and quickly close them. They might visit your profile and then pretend it was accidental. They may even hope, quietly, that you break first, that you give them an opening so they do not have to risk rejection. Because beneath the pride and independence is still a human being who felt something real. And if you are thinking about them every day, if your intuition keeps pulling you back to the memory of them, it is often because that emotional thread was never fully cut on either side. Connection leaves residue, especially when it ends without closure, especially when love was present but fear was louder. So while you are sitting there wondering why they occupy your thoughts so consistently, understand this. Avoidants do not escape feelings as easily as they appear to. They delay them, they mask them, they intellectualize them. But eventually, in quiet rooms and late nights, when distractions fade and ego softens, they feel them. And sometimes they feel them just as deeply as you do. And sometimes they feel them just as deeply as you do. But the fifth thing that is actually happening to them is something they would never easily admit. They are battling their own ego every single day. You have to understand something about an avoidance ego. It isn't arrogance in the way people think, it is protection. It is the shield they built long before you came into their life. That shield tells them not to chase, not to look needy, not to risk being rejected, not to expose soft emotions that could be used against them. So when they think about texting you, and yes, they do think about it, that shield activates. They might open your chat. They might type a simple message. Hey, how have you been? I was just thinking about you. And then they delete it. Not because they don't care, but because caring feels like losing control. They replay scenarios in their mind. What if you ignore them? What if you moved on? What if you respond coldly? Their pride whispers that silence is safer. Their heart whispers that reaching out might fix everything. That internal tug of war drains them. And the more days that pass without contact, the heavier that ego feels. Because now it isn't just about pride, it's about fear of facing what they may have already lost. The sixth thing happening to them is emotional withdrawal, and it feels more intense than they expected. When you were present in their life, even if they acted distant at times, your energy regulated something inside them. Your attention, your consistency, your warmth, it became part of their emotional routine. Avoidants do not always consciously realize when they attach, but they do. And when that attachment is suddenly removed, their nervous system feels the shift. At first, they tell themselves they are fine. They focus on independence, freedom, space, but slowly, subtle emptiness creeps in. Small habits remind them of you, the time of day you used to talk, the songs you shared, the jokes only the two of you understood. Emotional withdrawal is strange because it doesn't always look dramatic. It looks like restlessness, like checking their phone for no reason, like feeling slightly off without knowing why, like missing something but refusing to label it. They may try to replace the feeling with distractions, new conversations, busier schedules, louder environments. But emotional bonds are not easily swapped out, and when they realize that the comfort you provided cannot be replicated instantly, that's when the quiet ache begins. The seventh thing happening to them is self-questioning, even if they would never publicly admit it. Avoidant avoid vulnerability, but they are not incapable of reflection. When enough time passes, when silence stretches long enough, their mind begins to revisit things they once dismissed. Did they push you away too quickly? Were you actually asking for too much, or were they giving too little? Did they mistake closeness for pressure? These questions may surface late at night when there is no one around to perform for. They replay certain conversations, the ones where you tried to explain how you felt. They remember your disappointment, your patience, the moments you softened your tone just to avoid overwhelming them, and something inside them begins to recognize a pattern. It is uncomfortable, because recognizing a pattern means admitting responsibility, and responsibility feels heavy. But growth often begins in discomfort. So while you sit there wondering if they ever think about what happened, understand that avoidants do reflect, just privately. They may not reach out with an apology immediately, they may not know how to articulate their realizations, but internally, the awareness can grow stronger than their fear. The eighth thing happening to them is that they are watching from a distance, more than you realize. Silence does not equal absence. Avoidants may not announce their curiosity, but they feel it. They might check your social media quietly. They might notice changes in your tone, your photos, your energy. They observe whether you seem happier, whether someone new appears around you, whether your captions sound detached. And with each observation, emotions stir. Jealousy may surface unexpectedly, not loud jealousy, not dramatic scenes, but a subtle tightening in the chest when they imagine someone else stepping into the space they once occupied. They wonder if you are forgetting them. They wonder if you are becoming stronger without them. And here is the part that hits them the hardest, the realization that you might not need them anymore. Avoidants often feel secure when they believe someone will always be there, but when they sense you pulling back, growing, evolving, something inside them shifts. They begin to feel replaceable. And that feeling is deeply unsettling because deep down, they never wanted to lose you completely. They just didn't know how to hold you properly. The ninth thing happening to them is delayed emotion, finally catching up. Avoidants are known for feeling relief first. When distance begins, they may initially feel lighter, less pressure, less intensity, but emotions have a timeline of their own. Weeks later, sometimes even months later, longing begins to surface. It hits in unexpected waves. A memory that suddenly feels heavier, a dream that brings you back vividly, a random scent or place that reminds them of your presence. And when delayed emotion arrives, it often arrives all at once. Regret can feel sharper because it wasn't processed gradually. They start recognizing the depth of what they lost when it is no longer within reach. And here is where things become very real for them. They realize you were not just an option. You were someone who genuinely cared. Someone who stayed longer than most would. Someone who saw beyond their walls and still chose them. That realization can shake them more than any argument ever did. And finally, the 10th thing happening to them is this quiet, unspoken understanding that the bond might not actually be over, even if there has been no contact, even if pride still stands in the way. Emotional bonds do not dissolve simply because communication stops. If you are thinking about them every day, feeling their presence in your thoughts, it often means the connection left an imprint on both sides. Avoidants feel that imprint too. They may not label it as destiny. They may not romanticize it openly, but they sense unfinished emotion. They think about what could have been if fear had not interfered. They imagine scenarios where things unfolded differently, where they communicated better, where they stayed softer, where they didn't run. And in those quiet reflections, something tender happens inside them. They begin to understand that love is not weakness, that vulnerability is not loss of control, that closeness does not equal danger. So if an avoidant is on your mind every day, it is rarely one-sided. It means the connection mattered. It means something real existed. And while you may be sitting with longing, confusion, or unanswered questions, understand that on their side there may be pride, fear, ego, regret, curiosity, and delayed realization all colliding at once. Avoidants are not heartless. They are often just terrified of how deeply they feel. And sometimes by the time they understand the depth of it, silence has already grown wide. But that does not erase the fact that you impacted them, that you shifted something in them, that you made them feel in ways they were not used to feeling. And that kind of impact does not fade easily. In fact, the 11th thing that is happening to them is something much deeper than missing you. They are beginning to feel the loss of emotional security, even if they were the ones who created the distance. You might not realize this, but when you loved them, you became a quiet, safe place in their world. Not because they said it, not because they openly depended on you, but because your consistency softened something inside them. You understood their pauses. You didn't always demand immediate answers. You tried to love them in a way that didn't suffocate. And for someone who is used to protecting themselves emotionally, that kind of patience feels rare. Now that you're not as present, they feel the absence of that safety. They may not call it that. They may just feel off, less grounded, slightly unsettled. They may miss the way you made things feel calm without drama. They may miss the emotional reassurance that you gave so naturally. And here's the painful irony. They often only recognize how safe they felt with you after that safety is gone. When someone truly sees you and stays, it builds something subtle but powerful. And when that presence disappears, even the strongest avoidant feels the ground shift beneath them. The 12th thing happening to them is that they are trying to prove to themselves that they don't need you. And that battle is exhausting. Avoidants value independence deeply. It's not just preference, it's identity. So when they start missing you, when they feel your absence in their daily routine, their first instinct is to push back against that feeling. They throw themselves into work, into hobbies, into social plans, into anything that makes them feel self-sufficient. They tell themselves, I'm fine. I don't need anyone. This is better. But emotions don't disappear just because you deny them. So the more they try to suppress the fact that you mattered, the more it lingers in subtle ways. A quiet heaviness at night, a moment of loneliness in a crowded room, a thought of you that interrupts their focus. They may scroll past your name and pretend their heart didn't skip. They may hear a song and quickly change it because it reminds them of you. They are not as detached as they appear. They are trying to win a battle against their own heart. And the longer that fight continues, the more tired they become. Because deep down, a part of them knows that missing someone doesn't make them weak, it makes them human. The 13th thing happening to them is fear, not fear of you, but fear that you have changed. When you stop chasing, when your energy shifts, when your responses become calmer and less reactive, avoidants feel it immediately. You might think they don't notice. They do. They sense when you pull your emotions back. They sense when you stop over-explaining. They sense when your attachment loosens, and that scares them more than they expected. Because now the dynamic is different. Before, they may have felt secure knowing you cared deeply, knowing you would stay, knowing you were emotionally invested. But when you grow quieter and more self-contained, they begin to wonder if they've lost that position in your heart. They imagine you healing, they imagine you moving on, they imagine you becoming strong enough to walk away completely. And suddenly, the control they thought they had feels fragile. They may start questioning whether they waited too long, whether pride cost them something irreplaceable, whether you are slowly becoming someone who no longer looks back. And that possibility creates anxiety they cannot easily silence. Because nothing unsettles an avoidant more than realizing they may not be able to come back whenever they choose. The 14th thing happening to them is romanticizing the past in ways they never allowed themselves to before. Distance has a strange effect on memory. It softens the sharp edges and highlights the warmth. Arguments fade, tension blurs. What remains are the laughs, the intimate conversations, the small private moments that felt safe and unguarded. They might replay the way you looked at them when they opened up just a little, the way you touched their hand, the way you supported them without demanding anything in return. Nostalgia becomes powerful because it reminds them of who they were when they were with you, and sometimes they realize they felt more connected, more understood, more emotionally alive during that time than they admitted. They may begin imagining how things could have gone differently. What if they had communicated better? What if they had been braver? What if they had allowed themselves to lean in instead of pull away? Those what if thoughts can linger for hours. And even if they never say it out loud, a part of them may wish for another chance to handle things differently. And the 15th thing happening to them, perhaps the most important of all, is a quiet awakening about love itself. Avoidants often grow up believing that closeness equals loss of control, that vulnerability equals danger, that depending on someone equals eventual pain. But when they meet someone who challenges that belief, someone who loves them without trying to trap them, it plants a seed. Even if they run, even if they create distance, even if they stay silent, that seed remains. And over time, especially in your absence, it begins to grow into understanding. They start realizing that love doesn't always mean suffocation, that intimacy doesn't automatically mean losing themselves, that someone caring deeply for them was not a threat, but a gift. This realization may not come all at once. It may arrive slowly, through reflection, through loneliness, through comparison, through missed opportunities. But when it arrives, it changes them. Because now they cannot pretend they didn't feel something real. They cannot convince themselves it was all casual or insignificant. They know it mattered. You mattered. So if they are on your mind every day, understand this deeply. Connections like that do not exist in isolation. You don't carry someone daily in your thoughts without having left an imprint on theirs. While you may feel longing, they may be feeling ego battles, emotional withdrawal, nostalgia, fear, regret, awakening, all at once. Avoidants do not always express what moves inside them, but silence does not equal indifference. Distance does not equal lack of feeling. Sometimes it equals overwhelm. Sometimes it equals fear. Sometimes it equals a heart that feels deeply but never learned how to stay when things became real. And whether this connection finds its way back together or not, know this: you are not imagining the depth. You are not foolish for feeling it. You are not alone in the bond. If they cross your mind every single day, chances are, in quiet moments when no one is watching, you are crossing theirs too. And if you are crossing their mind too, the 16th thing that is happening to them is something subtle but powerful. They are feeling your emotional detachment, even if you have not said a word, even if you have not announced that you are moving on. Energy shifts long before conversations do. When you stop reacting the same way, when you stop over-explaining, when you stop trying to fix what they broke, it creates a silence that feels different. It feels final. Avoidants are extremely sensitive to emotional shifts, even if they pretend not to be. They notice when your messages lose urgency. They notice when you no longer sound hurt. They notice when your tone becomes calm instead of pleading. And that calmness unsettles them, because your emotional intensity once reassured them that you cared deeply. Your tears, your frustration, your passion, it all proved your attachment. But when you grow steady and grounded, when you stop fighting for their attention, they begin to sense something slipping away, and that realization creates an ache they cannot easily ignore. They may not understand it immediately, but what they are feeling is the fear of losing access to you, the fear that your heart is no longer open in the same way. And for someone who is used to keeping one foot out the door, suddenly realizing that you might be the one closing it can feel overwhelming. The 17th thing happening to them is an internal conflict that grows louder with time. Avoidants often live between two opposing desires: the desire for closeness and the desire for independence. When they were with you, those two forces were constantly in tension. They wanted you, but they also feared needing you. Now that there is distance, the conflict does not disappear. It intensifies. A part of them longs to reconnect, to hear your voice, to feel your presence again, but another part of them is terrified of stepping back into vulnerability. They ask themselves difficult questions. If they reach out, can they handle the depth this time? If they come back, will they retreat again? If they open their heart, will they lose themselves? This inner tug of war can keep them frozen. From the outside, it looks like indifference, but inside it feels like chaos. They may spend hours thinking about you and then convince themselves not to act. They may feel waves of longing and then quickly bury it under logic. This conflict is exhausting because it forces them to confront their deepest fears: fear of intimacy, fear of rejection, fear of being truly seen. And when you are someone who touched them deeply, that fear becomes even more intense. The 18th thing happening to them is that they are waiting for a sign. They may not admit it, but they are. Avoidants struggle with initiating emotional repair because it requires vulnerability. So instead of reaching out boldly, they look for small signals. They interpret your posts. They analyze your words. They wonder if a certain song you shared was meant for them. They ask themselves if your silence is permanent or temporary. They are searching for reassurance without asking for it directly. They may hope you send something simple, a neutral message that opens the door without forcing them to expose too much. Pride still stands in the way, but longing quietly grows behind it. They imagine scenarios where reconnection feels natural, casual, effortless. They rehearse what they might say if you contacted them first. And while they may appear strong and self-contained on the outside, internally they are hoping the universe gives them an excuse to bridge the gap, because taking the first step feels like risking their entire emotional stability. And that risk terrifies them more than they show. The 19th thing happening to them is gradual emotional maturity, even if it is uncomfortable. When someone impacts an avoidant deeply, it forces growth. You may not see it immediately, it may not happen while you are still present, but distance often becomes the teacher. They begin recognizing patterns in themselves. They notice how often they withdraw when things become serious. They start seeing how fear has shaped their decisions. They may even begin researching attachment styles, quietly trying to understand why closeness triggers them. This awareness does not mean instant transformation. Change is slow. But awareness is the first crack in old defenses. They start realizing that love does not have to feel suffocating, that someone asking for reassurance is not attacking their independence. That vulnerability might actually strengthen connection rather than destroy it. And here's what makes this powerful. You are the catalyst. Your presence, your patience, your departure, all of it forced reflection, even if you never see the outcome of that growth. You initiated it. You planted the question inside them. What if love isn't the enemy? And once that question exists, it does not disappear. And finally, the 20th thing happening to them is acceptance of the bond you shared. Not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, undeniable truth inside their heart. They may not shout it, they may not post about it, they may not confess it openly, but they know the connection was real. They know you mattered. They know something about you felt different from others. And when someone recognizes that truth, it lingers. They may carry you as a memory that shaped them, as a lesson, as a regret, as a what could have been, or perhaps as someone they will one day gather the courage to reach out to. But regardless of what happens next, your impact stays. So if they are on your mind every day, understand this on a deeper level. Bonds like that are rarely one-sided. You do not feel someone consistently without having been felt in return. You do not carry someone daily without having left fingerprints on their soul. Avoidants may hide, they may delay, they may deny, but they do not remain untouched. Behind the silence, behind the pride, behind the distance, emotions are moving, growth is happening, longing exists, fear exists, reflection exists. And while you sit there wondering if you meant anything, if they ever think about you, if they miss you the way you miss them, the answer is far more complex and far more human than you realize. They may not express it the way you would. They may not fight for it the way you hoped. But inside, in the quiet spaces where ego softens and honesty rises, they feel it. You mattered. You shifted something. And that kind of connection does not disappear easily.